Hi, I'm Alan Douglas. Welcome to my studio. This painting is called The Traitor, and what I want to show you in this video is a little bit of the glazing techniques that I'll use to do some color adjustments towards the end of the painting process. So as I said, this painting is almost completed. I've even included my signature here, which I sometimes do before I finish the painting process, in case I want to add glazes over the top of the signature, or I just want it dry before I put the finishing touches on. But before I start glazing, I do want to just share the medium that I'm going to be using. This is CRYPTID. This is an oil painting, and I like to use CRYPTID as a medium. Now, oil painting, other than any other painting medium, is very personal, and people like different mediums for different reasons. CRYPTID dries actually almost too fast, but I enjoy it because I generally don't have 10-12 hour painting sessions. So it keeps my paints workable for 3-4 hours, 5 hours, which is perfect. And then the painting is dry to the touch the next day. But what I like about it, and you can see the consistency, is it's a little thicker. It improves the gloss of the paint, and it speeds up the drying time. So it does everything that I need it to do. So I'm going to be using this to apply a couple of glazes. What I want to do is cool down certain areas and warm up certain areas, because what I want the light to hit in this area of the face, but down here I want it to kind of fall into cooler shadows, and I want to darken this a little bit too. So let me just show you my palette real quick. Here's some CRYPTID I just put on the palette. It's a good idea to use transparent pigments when you're applying glazes. So I got Indian yellow here, a little bit of white. This is what I'm going to use to try to warm up and lighten certain areas, like where the light's going to be hitting. So you can use it slightly opaque. You just can't jump into a value that doesn't fit the value pattern of where you're going to apply it. If you make too big of a jump, it will not have the effects that you're going for. And then I got a little ultramarine blue here and some sepia. The sepia is just kind of to darken it up and to balance the cools that I'll be using. So you can see basically what a glaze is it's very little pigment compared to the medium you're using. So you can see right now that's a little warm for me, so I'll just add a little more blue. And then we'll start applying it. So you can see it's very, if you were doing it in watercolor, you'd probably call it a wash. There's very little pigment to water. This is the same thing, medium to water, or medium to oil, or medium to pigment, I should say. There's not much pigment in it. So I do want to darken this area up here. So you can see that's actually having very little effect, so I want to add a little more pigment than what I have there. It's a good idea to use a pretty soft brush for this as well. So you can see it darkens it slightly and it cools it down slightly. And the beauty of glazes is you can do as many as you need to achieve the desired effect. So just by darkening this, it'll make this look a little brighter. And like I said, I do want to try to include a lightening glaze there too. So basically what I'm doing is increasing the contrast a lot, and I can see it got a little hair in there, so pick that up, get rid of it. I sometimes don't mind the imperfections of little hairs and stuff getting in my painting, but if they're too noticeable or they're in an area that I don't want them, I will remove them. But personally, I like looking at a painting and seeing a little bit of that painting process in it, even if it means getting some hairs in there and that sort of thing. I actually enjoy seeing that in other people's work. I don't know if other people do or not. Some people want a very pristine application to their surface. But as long as it's not in an important area, I don't mind it. Now I also want to darken this corner here. It's almost like I'm creating a vignette feel, so I want to darken the corners. And by darkening the values of the corners, what it does is it brings your viewer eye into the center of the image, which is obviously the focal point of this particular picture. So you can see how it cools it down and darkens it a little bit. I'll add some here, but I'm being careful not to get it on this side of the horn. I just want it on this side of the horn that's facing away from the light. Hopefully you can see that pretty good. There's some glare. Now I also want to darken his chin and cool it down a little. This is where you can't be afraid to just paint over everything you've done. As long as it's transparent enough, you're not ruining any of the structure there. You're just darkening it and cooling it a little. Now obviously the one thing you have to watch for is to make sure that your painting is completely dry to the touch before you start doing this. Otherwise you will pick up pigment that you don't want to pick up. Now this is the transition. I want it to get warmer right about here, so I don't want to go too far up the face with this cool glaze. Actually, but my brush strokes here, if it gets a little, if I leave a little streaks of the glaze, that actually works into the subject of my painting, because I want kind of his side chin hair there to start right about here. So just adding some of that softer brush strokes there, just letting them show just ever so slightly, will still have the desired effect that I'm going for. So as the form falls into shadow here, I am glazing it down. I'm actually going to glaze right in this whole area because I want to darken, I want to lower the contrast of the transition between the ground here and his head. Now, the whole concept of this piece is when you first glance at the piece, it just looks like a normal portrait, but after you look at it a second, you do notice that it's a severed head as opposed to a normal head. So, in keeping with that vignette feel, I'm just going to add a little bit down here. And I'm going to try to add that lightning glaze as well. I just have to clean my brush because I don't want the darker pigment mixed in there. Okay, so this next glaze is going to be a little bit of the Indian yellow to apply to include some warm pigment, as well as just a little bit of white to see if I can lighten it up. And then just kind of glaze it all down. I think I need a little bit more yellow, because white is essentially a cool color. So that was actually cooling it down a little more than I wanted. There we go, a little more yellow. This kind of unifies all the colors in the area that I want to unify as well. So these are pretty subtle temperature shifts, but to me they're pretty important to help direct the viewer's eye to where I want it to go. And again, I don't want to go too far down into the cools because I want this part of his face to remain in shadow. So I will bring it down to about here, and I brought the cools up to about here, and I'm just going to leave that kind of middle tone untouched as far as glazing goes, because that'll provide a little bit of a transition for me. So you can see how this is warming it up, adding a little yellow, kind of goes in sync with the yellows of the greens in the background, so you get a feel for what kind of light is hitting it. And one thing I want to do is right in here I want to add a shadow glaze, but I want it to be a warm shadow glaze, not a cool shadow glaze like over here. So I'll just mix some yellow with some of that sepia, see if that gets not dark enough, so let me add a little more sepia. There we go. It's always good to kind of keep your brush going in the direction that the form is as well. So you can see the spiral and curve of the horn, so my brush strokes are matching that. So that should give you a little insight into glazing. Now what I will probably do is, this is actually my favorite part of the painting because I just adjust things, push and pull things, add little details here and there. I'm noticing one of the things I probably want to do is, you know, I did add this one scar here, but I think I want to give them a couple more scars along the way. And then I'll be able to call this one done.